By the winter of 2024, I had learned exactly how long a man could sit silently at his own family's dinner table before he became part of the furniture. About 20 minutes. After that, conversation simply flowed around him, not through him, around him, like water around a stone. The dining room in Michael's house was always too warm. Claire kept the thermostat at 76 because she claimed cold air aged the skin, which sounded like something she'd picked up from one of those women online who sold collagen powder and talked about toxins while drinking wine from glasses the size of flower vases. The windows fogged during dinner. The chandelier reflected in the glass like a second room floating outside in the dark. And every Thursday at precisely 6:30, we sat at the same oak table I had paid for. Solid white oak, Amish made, $11,400 after delivery. Claire liked to tell guests she had an eye for timeless pieces. What she had was my American Express card from the summer of 2021. That Thursday, she served sea bass with lemon butter sauce and tiny potatoes roasted in duck fat. Expensive food arranged in careful little stacks. Nobody in that house ever simply ate anymore. They curated meals. My grandson Tyler poked at his plate while scrolling on his phone beneath the table. "Phone's away," Claire snapped. The boy was 16 and built like a fence post, all elbows and resentment. He rolled his eyes dramatically, but obeyed. "Dad," Michael said suddenly, cutting into the fish. "You left the garage light on again last night." There it was, the opening shot. I took a sip of water before answering. I was reorganizing some boxes. "At midnight?" Claire asked without looking at me. Her tone had that polished smoothness people mistake for politeness. Underneath, it was steel wool. I couldn't sleep. Michael sighed the way exhausted fathers sigh in pharmaceutical commercials. The electric bill was $913 this month. I nearly laughed. $913 in a house with heated bathroom floors, a wine refrigerator, 2 Sub-Zero freezers, 3 constantly running televisions, and a backyard pool that steamed like Yellowstone every winter evening. But apparently the problem was the old man and his garage light. "I can pay more toward utilities," I said quietly. Claire finally looked at me then. "Oh, Thomas, it's not about the money." That sentence is always about the money. Always. The dining room smelled faintly of rosemary, expensive candles, and tension old enough to vote. I stared down at my plate and suddenly remembered another kitchen, another table. My wife, Evelyn, standing barefoot over a stove in 1989 wearing one of my old mechanic shirts while spaghetti sauce simmered in a dented aluminum pot. We had eaten on folding chairs back then because we couldn't afford proper furniture. But nobody at that table had ever made me feel unwelcome. Evelyn died on April 14th, 2018. Pancreatic cancer. 7 months from diagnosis to funeral. You learn strange details after 50 years with someone. The exact weight of their footsteps at night. The shape their body leaves in a mattress. The sound of their breathing during bad dreams. And then one day, all those sounds disappear. The silence afterward is not peaceful. It is industrial, heavy machinery silence. After Evelyn died, I sold Reynolds Automotive Group 18 months later. 3 garages, 1 collision center, 42 years of work. The final sale price was $3.4 million before taxes. Michael cried when I told him, not because he was proud, because he immediately began talking about legacy planning. I should have recognized the smell of greed then. I spent my whole life around oil and burnt transmissions. I knew contamination when I saw it. But grief makes fools of old men. By October 2020, I had transferred $640,000 toward the purchase of this house in Westport. Another $118,000 went into renovations, elevator installation, expanded kitchen, landscaping. The garage apartment where I now lived above neatly labeled plastic Christmas decorations and Claire's and used Peloton bike. "We'll all live together," Michael had said at the time, "like a real family." Family. That word has buried more old men than heart disease. Tyler suddenly pushed his chair back. "I'm done." "You barely ate," Claire said. "I have practice." "You have calculus tutoring." I said, "I have practice." Michael's jaw tightened immediately. Everything in that house operated through tiny territorial wars. "Don't speak to your mother like that." Tyler muttered something under his breath and disappeared upstairs. Claire stabbed at her fish. Honestly, I don't know what happened to kids. No respect, no discipline. I watched Michael carefully avoid looking at me when she said it. That was becoming his special talent. Avoidance. Avoiding conflict. Avoiding honesty. Avoiding the fact that the 72-year-old man sitting across from him had financed nearly every polished surface in that room. Instead, he reached for his wine. A Caymus Cabernet. 2021 vintage. $300 a bottle. The restaurant investors are meeting again Monday, he said casually. Claire brightened immediately. That's good. It's progress. Progress. That damned restaurant had consumed almost 2 years, and as I would later discover, nearly $1.8 million in loans, refinancing, and investor debt. At the time, I only knew fragments. Late-night phone calls, bank envelopes, Michael drinking antacids straight from the bottle at 2 in the morning. You still seeing that attorney? I asked. Both of them froze for half a second. Tiny thing, but age teaches you to notice hesitation. Which attorney? Claire asked too quickly. The one from Stanford. Michael wiped his mouth carefully with a linen napkin. Just contract stuff. MHM. Silence settled over the table again. Then Claire smiled. Bright. Artificial. Sharp enough to shave skin. Well, she said lightly. At least if things ever got difficult around here, there's some really beautiful senior communities nearby. And there it was. Not a joke. Not really. More like a test balloon drifting silently into the air to see whether anyone objected. Michael looked down at his plate. I sat there with my hands folded while the chandelier hummed softly overhead, like a stranger. In the house I paid for, at the table I bought, eating food I no longer tasted. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. I did not sleep that night. At my age, insomnia arrives quietly. No drama. No staring contest with the ceiling like in movies. You simply stop sleeping and start existing horizontally. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up pretending and made coffee in the little kitchenette above the garage. The refrigerator hummed beside me. Outside, sleet ticked softly against the windows. My apartment smelled faintly of cedarwood, motor oil trapped in old jackets, and the peppermint liniment I rubbed into my knees every evening. I stood there in gray sweatpants and Evelyn's old cardigan watching snow gather along the driveway lights below. Then I saw Michael. He crossed the backyard carrying his phone, shoulders hunched against the cold. Even from the second-floor window, I could tell he was agitated, pacing, rubbing his forehead, stopping every few seconds like a man trying not to explode. The patio heater glowed orange beside him. I cracked the window slightly. No, you told me February, he hissed into the phone. You said we had until February. A pause. No, listen to me, Richard. If this goes public now, we're finished. Another pause. Then silence except for sleet and distant highway noise. Finally, he said something that settled directly into my stomach, like a brick. My father can't find out about this. I stepped away from the window immediately. Funny thing about betrayal. Your body understands it before your mind does. Your chest tightens first. Your breathing changes. Your hands go cold. The brain arrives later with explanations. By 7:30 that morning, Claire was already blending one of her green drinks downstairs. The Vitamix sounded like industrial machinery chewing gravel. I came down slowly. My knees were stiff from weather. Claire stood barefoot in cream-colored athletic wear worth more than my first monthly mortgage payment back in 1976. The kitchen counters were crowded with supplements in matte glass jars labeled things like cleanse and restore. Morning, she said without warmth. Morning. She poured almond milk into a mug and glanced toward the hallway to make sure Michael wasn't nearby. Then she lowered her voice. You mentioned Stanford yesterday. I did. What exactly were you asking? Direct. No pretending now. I buttered a piece of toast carefully before answering. You both seem nervous lately. That's called running a business. Her jaw flexed slightly. Claire had one of those faces that remained beautiful only as long as it remained controlled. The moment irritation entered, something hard surfaced underneath. No, she said casually. Stress affects Michael more than he admits. He always carried things poorly. He carries everyone, she corrected. I almost laughed at that. Michael carried nothing. Michael outsourced suffering the way rich people outsource lawn care. I sat at the island while steam rose from my coffee. You remember 2008? I asked. Claire frowned slightly. What about it? That recession nearly buried My collision center. Insurance contract collapsed. Payroll was due every Friday, whether business existed or not. She said, nothing. I worked 16-hour days for almost a year. Slept in my office twice a week. You've told us. No, I said quietly. I don't think I have. The kitchen fell silent, except for the refrigerator compressor clicking on. Do you know what your husband was doing during those 16-hour shifts? Claire crossed her arms. He was in college. He was drunk in Cancun. Her expression hardened instantly. That's unfair. No, it's accurate. I finished the coffee and stood carefully. I built things, Claire. Michael borrows them. The look she gave me then could have peeled paint. By noon, the snow had turned to cold rain. I drove my old Lexus into Stamford for the first time in months. The car smelled faintly of leather conditioner and peppermint gum. Evelyn used to keep peppermints in the center console for road trips. 5 years later, I still bought the same brand out of habit. Some griefs calcify into routine. The attorney's office occupied the 4th floor of a narrow brick building overlooking Atlantic Street. Brass directory downstairs. Beige carpeting upstairs. The same artificial lemon smell every law office somehow shares. Harold Benton looked 90 years old and furious at the concept of mortality itself. He had been Evelyn's attorney first, then mine. Thomas, he said, shaking my hand. You look terrible. Good to see you too. You here for a will revision? Maybe. He motioned me into his office. The room looked exactly as it had 15 years ago. Framed degrees, green banker's lamp, dusty shelves, a ticking wall clock loud enough to interrogate prisoners. Harold removed his glasses slowly. What happened? I told him everything. Not dramatically, just facts. The comments, the tension, the late-night phone call, the mention of senior housing. When I finished, Harold leaned back heavily. How much money did you put into that property? $758,000 altogether. His eyebrows climbed. And whose name is on the deed? Michael and Claire's. That was stupid. I know. You signed loan guarantees? No. Good. He opened a yellow legal pad. Did you document the transfers? Yes. Loan or gift? That's the thing. I hesitated. Mostly gifts, but not all. Harold looked up sharply. I remembered the afternoon clearly. August 12th, 2021. Rainstorm outside. Michael sweating through a blue dress shirt while explaining temporary financing issues connected to construction overruns. I just need flexibility for 6 months, Dad. Evelyn used to say desperation always smells metallic. That afternoon, I smelled it on him, so I made him sign paperwork. A private promissory note, $300,000, secured against future sale proceeds of the property. At the time, Michael laughed about my old-school paranoia. Now Harold was smiling for the first time all afternoon. You still have the original? In my safe. Well, he tapped the desk lightly. That changes things. Outside, rain streaked down the windows in gray ribbons. For the first time in months, I felt warmth returning to my hands. Not happiness. Something colder. Balance. Harold folded his hands. One more question, Thomas. What? Do you want revenge? I thought about Michael at 12 years old helping me change brake pads in Garage 2. I thought about Evelyn crying after paying his second rehab bill at 24. I thought about sitting at that enormous oak table while strangers discussed where to warehouse me for the remainder of my life. Then I remembered Claire smiling when she mentioned senior communities. I looked directly at Harold. No, I said quietly. I want my seat back. The first foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday. Certified mail. Bright green sticker across the envelope, like a warning label on industrial chemicals. Claire opened it at the kitchen island while sipping one of her protein drinks. I was sitting nearby, repairing an old table lamp from the garage apartment. A simple rewiring job. The kind of thing that calms the hands. I watched her face change color in stages. First confusion, then irritation, then something much uglier. Michael, she shouted. Her voice cracked through the house, hard enough to shake dust from the stair railings. He came downstairs, already wearing his navy overcoat, Bluetooth earpiece blinking against his temple. What? She shoved the papers toward him. For a few seconds, he just stared, not reading, staring, like a man recognizing the shape of a bullet before impact. What is this? She hissed. Michael glanced toward me immediately. That told me everything. Interesting, isn't it? Guilty people always check whether the old man noticed, as if age somehow makes you blind instead of patient. It's temporary, he muttered. Temporary? Claire's voice rose another octave. It says default proceedings. Lower your voice. Oh, now you care about volume? I continued, quietly tightening brass screws into the lamp socket. Click, click, click. The domestic soundtrack of financial collapse. Claire slapped the papers onto the marble counter. How much debt are we talking about? Michael rubbed both hands across his face. About 800. 800,000? Closer to 1.2 now. The kitchen went dead silent. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. Then Claire laughed once. A terrible sound, not humor. Nerves splitting open. You told me the investors were covering the bridge loans. They backed out after December. And you didn't think to mention that. I was handling it. You were hiding it. Their voices bounced off the high ceilings, while snow drifted softly beyond the windows. I sat there beside my half-disassembled lamp and suddenly realized something strange. I no longer felt shocked, only tired, because somewhere deep down, I had expected this. Michael had spent his entire adult life treating consequences like weather. Unpleasant things that eventually passed if someone else covered enough damage. Usually, that someone had been me. Not this time. Claire snatched the papers again. Jesus Christ, she whispered. There are liens on the house. Michael said nothing. Her head snapped toward him. You used the house as collateral? It was temporary. You used this house? Our equity position was strong. She stopped herself abruptly and looked toward me again. That was the moment she remembered whose money built their precious equity. Her face tightened immediately. We shouldn't discuss this in front of Thomas. Thomas, not Dad, not family. Thomas. Funny how quickly people become formal when money starts bleeding. I rose slowly from the stool. You're right, I said calmly. You probably shouldn't. Upstairs in the garage apartment, I sat beside the window and listened to them fight for nearly 2 hours. Not every word, just fragments drifting through heating vents and old pipes. Never told me. Thought we had time. Father's money. Bankruptcy. What about the kids? At one point something shattered downstairs. Glass, probably. Claire had expensive taste in objects and violent taste in arguments. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Harold, you sitting down? He asked. I'm old, Harold. I'm always sitting. I had my office pull county records this morning. A pause, then paper shuffling. There are 3 separate commercial liens attached to the property. 2 private lenders and First National. How bad? Bad enough that your son's drowning. I looked out at the backyard, where Tyler was half-heartedly throwing a football to himself in the snow. How exposed is the house? Very. And my note? Still valid. That sentence warmed me better than whiskey. Harold continued. The promissory agreement gives you standing as secured private creditor. Michael was sloppy, extremely sloppy. He learned that from his mother's side. No, Harold replied dryly. Sloppy greed is inherited universally. I almost smiled. Can they lose the house? Yes. When? Depends how ugly this gets. After the call, I opened the old fireproof safe beneath my bed. Inside sat 30 years of documents organized in label folders. Evelyn used to mock me for keeping records on everything. Thomas, she'd laugh. If civilization collapses, you'll still have appliance warranties. But Evelyn also understood something important. Paper survives denial. I removed the original promissory note carefully. August 12, 2021. Michael's signature sat crooked at the bottom beside mine. $300,000. Interest deferred for 24 months. Secured interest tied to future sale or refinancing of the property. At the time he signed, without reading properly, he was desperate and arrogant, a dangerous combination. I remembered him grinning afterward. Dad, you really think I'd ever screw you over? Back then I answered too quickly. No, son. That evening Claire announced dinner would be light. Translation. She was furious and no longer interested in performing domestic elegance. We ate rotisserie chicken from Whole Foods at the kitchen island instead of the formal dining room. Nobody spoke much. Tyler kept glancing between his parents. My granddaughter Sophie, 14, painfully observant. Finally broke the silence. Are we poor now? Claire nearly dropped her fork. Don't be ridiculous. You guys only whisper like this when money's involved. Michael snapped immediately. Enough. The girl flinched. I saw it. So, did he? For 1 second, shame crossed his face like a shadow. Then it vanished. People think financial collapse begins with banks. It doesn't. It begins the first time children become afraid at dinner. Claire stood abruptly and carried her wine into the living room. Michael stayed seated beside me. For several minutes, we listened to the dishwasher running. Finally, he spoke quietly. Dad, I kept eating. I may need your help temporarily. There it was. Not apology, not honesty. Need. I dabbed my mouth with a napkin. How temporary? A few months. How much? He hesitated. That depends on whether the restaurant stabilizes. I looked directly at him then. My son, 50 years old, silver beginning at his temples, expensive watch on his wrist, panic buried beneath forced composure. And suddenly I saw him clearly. Not evil, worse, weak. Weak enough to mortgage his family's future while pretending success still existed. Weak enough to risk everyone else before sacrificing himself. You remember your mother's hospital room? I asked quietly. His forehead creased. What? The last week. Dad. She asked you for one thing. Michael stared at me silently. She said, take care of your father when I'm gone. His eyes dropped immediately. That hurt him. Good. Because pain was finally reaching the correct address. I have taken care of you, I continued softly, for 30 years, longer than necessary. The dishwasher clicked off. The house settled around us. Then Michael whispered the one sentence that ended whatever remained between us. You always make everything sound transactional. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I laughed. Not loudly, not angrily, just tired. Because the man sitting across from me truly believed $758,000, a house, decades of rescue, and the remainder of my old age were somehow not transactions already. Thanksgiving arrived gray and wet, the kind of November rain that turns every road in Connecticut the color of old steel. Claire insisted on hosting anyway. Normalcy is important for the children, she said 3 days before dinner, standing in the kitchen with dark circles beneath her eyes and a glass of Chardonnay in her hand at 11 in the morning. Normalcy. Meanwhile, collection notices were arriving almost daily. White envelopes, yellow envelopes, FedEx packets. One courier in a black raincoat had shown up Tuesday evening while Michael pretended not to be home. I watched from the garage apartment window as the man finally taped legal papers directly to the front door. That's adulthood in America now. Debt delivered like pizza. By noon and Thanksgiving, the house smelled of sage, brown butter, garlic, and panic. Claire moved through the kitchen in a fitted cream sweater, aggressively whisking gravy while issuing instructions nobody wanted. Sophie set the water glasses. Tyler, stop disappearing every 20 minutes. Michael, answer your phone. I'm not answering today. You can't ignore creditors forever. Could we not do this right now? No, she snapped, slamming a cabinet hard enough to rattle dishes. Actual now is exactly when we do this. I sat quietly near the fireplace, polishing my reading glasses with a cloth napkin. Invisible. Old men become invisible long before they become dead. A 3 o'clock guest arrived. Claire's sister Denise with her orthodontist husband. A cousin from New Jersey. 2 loud grandchildren under 10 carrying tablets sticky with fingerprints. Everyone performed happiness with the strained enthusiasm of community theater actors. The dining room glowed gold beneath the chandelier. Turkey arranged perfectly. Candles lit. Crystal glasses lined precisely beside the plates. And at the center of the table sat Michael, sweating. I noticed details others missed. His untouched bourbon, his bouncing knee, the way he checked his phone every 30 seconds beneath the tablecloth. Predators smell weakness in nature. Banks do too. Dinner began awkwardly. Denise complimented the sweet potatoes. Someone discussed interest rates. Football murmured softly from the den television. Then Claire made her mistake. She smiled too brightly at me across the table and said, Thomas has been talking about downsizing lately. Silence. Tiny. Sharp. Michael looked up immediately. I folded my napkin carefully onto my lap. Have I? Claire continued before I could answer. There's a wonderful senior living community near Greenwich. Private dining, gardens, medical staff, 24 hours. Tyler stopped eating. Sophie stared directly at her mother. Even Denise shifted uncomfortably. I looked at Claire for several seconds before speaking. You seem very eager to relocate me. Oh, no, she laughed quickly. Not relocate. Just simplify things for you. Simplify. Such a clean word for disposal. Michael cleared his throat. Dad, maybe this isn't the best time. No, I interrupted softly. Actually, this seems like exactly the right time. The rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere upstairs, plumbing groaned through old pipes. I reached slowly into the leather portfolio resting beside my chair. Claire's smile disappeared instantly. Michael went pale. That interested me, because I suddenly realized he knew exactly what sat inside that portfolio. I removed several documents and placed them gently beside my plate. Nobody moved. You know, I said calmly, I spent 42 years owning auto repair shops. Denise blinked. Really? 3 locations by the end. I slid one paper across the table toward Michael. Know what mechanics learn early? No answer. We learned small noises matter. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he read the top page. Notice of default. Another paper followed. Commercial lien filing. Then another. Private creditor claim. Claire whispered. Michael, I kept going. The trouble with debt is that people think it arrives all at once. It doesn't. I looked around the table. It arrives quietly, piece by piece, hidden beneath nice kitchens and holiday dinners. Denise's husband slowly lowered his fork. The children had stopped talking completely. Finally, Sophie asked the question nobody else dared ask. Dad, are we losing the house? Claire snapped immediately. Enough. But Michael still hadn't spoken. He sat frozen beneath chandelier light, while legal documents spread across the oak table like autopsy photos. I reached into the portfolio once more and removed the promissory note. The original. Michael recognized it instantly. His face drained completely of color. Dad, he said quietly. Too late. I slid the note toward Claire. What is this? She whispered. A loan agreement, I answered. $300,000. Her eyes moved rapidly across the signatures. You borrowed money from him? Michael finally exploded. I was handling it. With what? Claire hissed. Fantasy. Guests stared openly now. Denise looked horrified. The orthodontist suddenly became deeply interested in his wine glass. I sat back slowly. For 4 years, I said, I have listened to conversations about utility bills while paying for this house twice over. Nobody interrupted. For 4 years, I sat at this table like an unwanted tenant while my son leveraged this property into nearly $2 million of debt. Claire looked at Michael like she'd never seen him before. Maybe she hadn't. The strongest lies in families are rarely spoken aloud. They're performed. Michael suddenly stood up so quickly his chair slammed backward onto the hardwood. You want to humiliate me? He shouted. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. You're my father. Yes, I replied. And you treated me like furniture. The room went completely silent. Even the rain seemed to stop. Michael looked around desperately, as though someone might rescue him from consequence itself. Nobody moved, because the truth had finally entered the room, and truth is heavy. People rarely know where to place their hands once it arrives. Claire spoke next, very softly. How bad is it really? Michael closed his eyes. That was answer enough. Then came a knock at the front door. 3 hard strikes. Everyone jumped. I already knew. Michael knew too. He didn't move. So I stood slowly, walked through the silent hallway, and opened the door. A man in a dark overcoat stood holding a sealed packet. Michael Reynolds? I nodded toward the dining room. Behind me, I heard Claire whisper, Oh my God. The man stepped inside, removed papers from the envelope, and said the sentence that finally shattered whatever illusion remained in that house. You've been formally served. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription.